Thank you all for allowing us to be here today. We certainly want to acknowledge the work that school boards and superintendents do to welcome our new teachers into the schools and to the buildings each year. You all do an incredible job with building relationships with those beginning teachers, and we know that this issue of teacher shortages is very important to you all, as well as our teacher colleges and also the State Department of Education. This is not a new issue. In 2003, Governor Jim Hunt, or former Governor Jim Hunt from North Carolina, headed up a task force from the Education Commission of the states. And he revealed that we had at that time what's called holes in the bucket. We had an enormous number of teachers leaving in the first 5 years. That has since been exacerbated by two other phenomenons. One, we have an inverse relationship between the number of students that we have in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the number of students entering teacher education programs. And we also have an enormous number of baby boomers who are leaving the profession at this particular time. So the jobs are available, but unfortunately, it's disheartening to see that there's no one there often to fill them. Just a few years ago, as superintendent, it was very disheartening to see 80 applicants for one elementary job or two elementary jobs. Now, it's just as disheartening or even more disheartening to see one elementary job and no applicants. And that's actually happened here recently, where a local school division that I've worked with had to hire a provisional, someone with a provisional license to fill that position. So today, I'm very fortunate to moderate. We have two outstanding educators who are doing some really good things out into the field at the state and local level, some innovative things to attract teachers, to train teachers, and to improve the working conditions for teachers out in the school buildings. We have Dr. Ken Akali from Radford University, who's the Dean of the School of Education there, and we have Dr. Joan Johnson, who is the Director of Teacher Education at the Department of Education. And at this time, I'll call on Dr. Johnson to kind of tell us where we are in terms of data with regards to the teacher shortage in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Brewster. As Dr. Brewster indicated, this is not a new phenomenon. So we have a few just graphic presentations that we hope will give you an idea, and they're pretty small, but I think you have access to our PowerPoint as part of your packet. And this particular PowerPoint, we also would indicate that this has a few additional slides than the one that was originally presented to your organization. And again, just to highlight, again, with a graphic presentation, you see the great increase from 2008-9 through 2011 of K through 12 students in the Commonwealth. This is reported data from the U.S. Department of Education in 2015. And then you see the sharp decline of our trend in the teacher preparation programs in the state. We do have 36 active approved programs within the Commonwealth. There are other institutions, but those 36 are the approved by the state to offer the licensure programs. And so we see the sharp decline and decrease there. Additional data in terms of national results, the ACT and the U.S. Department of Ed, during their process of collecting demographics of those that are test takers from their population, their research indicates as well that fewer graduates are actually going into or have an interest in the profession of education. Additionally, we see that from our colleges as well, that they are less interested in seeking education careers for a variety of reasons, which we're going to talk about today as well. But some of that is also impacting the pool from which we can draw. Then our next slide highlights, again, within the Commonwealth, representing the licensed instructional personnel that we have over 97,000 in the state. You see there, again, the unpacking of really the race and ethnicity of those that are licensed in the state, which also we'll talk a little bit more about in terms of the contrast there, as well in the number of minorities or the diverse population of educators going into the field there. You see that, you notice in this slide, graphically that the number of our diverse students are rising where our teachers are declining. Next slide.
Dr. Johnson, could you speak into this microphone?
Okay, sure. Is that better? Okay. Okay. All right. I guess we'll pass the microphone. Okay. Is that okay? Thank you. All right. And I guess we were going to also provide a caveat that in my current role, I serve as the Director of Teacher Education and Licensure in the Division of Teacher Ed and Licensure under Assistant Superintendent Patty Pitts. So most of our presentation from me today will represent predominantly information offered by my division, and specifically my role is working with the institutions of higher ed in the regulations and monitoring of our state and federal guidelines as relates to teacher preparation. So just to give you some context, that today much of my statistics, however, will represent our state, but much of the strategies and our discussion for this panel will focus predominantly on my role and my work within my department. But we can share that given the 97,000 teachers in the Commonwealth, approximately 5% of those teachers in the state have a provisional license. And that means or indicates that individuals are filling positions that they can't hire individuals that have full and regular license for. So these would not be our individuals that are completing our approved programs, but individuals that are coming potentially maybe from another major that may have a strong content background and fit the niche within the school division such that they believe that within 3 years they can meet the state's requirements for the regular license. And so obviously that pool, 5%, meaning those are not qualified individuals when they're hired. All right. And then you notice there that candidates, just to give emphasis there, that candidates must obtain passing scores on the professional tests and assessments within 3 years to move from that provisional license to the regular. And as we mentioned assessments, just to give you some national background there, we do recognize that the achievement gaps on licensure tests also mirror achievement gaps in K-12 tests as well. And the largest pass rate gaps between white and African American test takers were found in the sciences, math, English, and social studies and subject tests. And gaps between white and minority test takers were greater for constructed response versus the multiple choice there. So just to give us a little information there. Next slide. Again, unpacking our Commonwealth information. And I think you all are probably more familiar with this than I. But you see the unfilled positions as of 2016. And the number as of October 1, 2016 is over 1,000 unfilled teaching positions. And I know we've seen the news that that number is probably going to be represented again for us in the Commonwealth this year. But as of 2016, October 1, there were 1,000, over 1,000 unfilled positions. And the next slide indicates the particular percentage and number of positions unfilled in teaching area, and we see there our highest need in special education and elementary ed. And predominantly elementary ed is there because of the number required typically. And I think that ends just to give us a level plane in terms of what some of the statistics look like and unpacking our challenge here in Virginia.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. At this time, Dr. Colley, you all are doing a lot of innovative things at Radford University to address the issues of teacher shortages. Tell us some of those best practices that you all are implementing there at Radford University.
Thank you for having us here today. It's just wonderful to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. I started my career as a public school teacher, and I feel like that public school teacher is in me each and every day as we train teachers at Radford University. And I taught in Virginia schools. First of all, I want to point out that higher education in teacher ed programs is not a barrier of creating teachers for the Commonwealth, because a lot of times I think we are blamed that, well, you have too many regulations, you have too many hoops to jump through. We're working very hard to try to take down a lot of those barriers, to work with our partners in DOE, even sometimes when we don't agree. We have conversations, we pick up the phone and call our partners at the DOE all the time. Sometimes we push back a little bit to say we want to see changes in some of the expectations. I think the other things that we are doing is, one of the things we're doing that Mr. Gillespie misspoke about was we do have four-year programs, and we have four-year programs at Radford University. So not everybody ends with a five-year program. And so we are even trying to take those four-year programs and shorten them to maybe 3 years sometimes, to really provide a lot of creative ways for students to finish in a shorter amount of time to get to the place where they can become teachers in classrooms.
I would concur there, the majority of the programs in the state are undergrad, leading to a license.
Right. So I think that that was one thing I just wanted to clarify. We do believe, obviously, strongly in getting master's degrees for teachers because we want to continue to learn and grow, but at the same time, we understand the need, and we've always had that at Radford, those programs. The other thing is we are doing a lot of things because we know they used to be called millennials, now I hear they're called centennials. And there's a lot of information about what these centennials look like when they come to us if we're looking at a traditional 18-year-old population. We used to have 11% of all freshmen across the nation used to go into teacher education. Now we have less than 4% going into teacher education. And so our recruitment is just generally through the roof. I mean, I sat down last week because I was having some problems with my smartphone, and there was this young man at the Verizon store, and he was just engaging and wonderful at what he did, and I said, I think you need to become a teacher. So, I mean, we are recruiting absolutely everywhere that you can imagine. And I gave him my card and I said, give me a call. I have a program just for you and I may have some grants that we can help you with your tuition. So we're doing a lot of things. We have some pipelines. We have a Teachers for Tomorrow pipeline that we've started. I am out there recruiting for donations for teacher scholarships every single day. So we started with some scholarships for our incoming freshmen for our Teachers for Tomorrow program, and we just granted those for the first time from some generous donors. We're going to start a crowdfunding campaign, so hopefully I'll get your listserv today, so I can send you a crowdfunding campaign to raise money for those teacher education scholarships. We're doing that from October 16th to November 16th. But those are the kind of things that we have to do. We are courting those 18-year-olds, bringing them in, and from day one we are wrapping them with support of what it's like to be a teacher, what a rewarding career it is, what we can do to take them as 18-year-olds and spend time with them. So I teach an undergraduate class of all teacher ed candidates, along with Dr. Tammy Wallace, our associate dean. We were both public school teachers. And so I've got 27 young people sitting in front of me as freshmen who are going to be teachers. And so we spend time with them. We created an Educators Rising chapter. We had a conference yesterday for Educators Rising. We had 75 slots for students who are in the Teacher for Tomorrow programs. It filled in 2 days. We had no idea it would be that popular, so we'll create another one. So yesterday, out of those 75 high school students, we were offering on-site acceptance to Radford University in the teacher ed program, and we were offering scholarships. We have strong teacher scholarships because in 1910 we were founded as a teacher education institute. That mentorship along the way has got to be there. So we are looking at an early field experience to get them out as both sophomores and juniors into the public schools. So they are out there alongside teachers and with children, so they are always immersed in what is this career going to look like to be a teacher. And we have to start that young. We have to get them out young. So even though my resources are quite stretched, we do not have, we're quite lean at Radford University, but we're extremely creative and resourceful. We try to look at ways that we can partner with our public schools and get those students out there. So we're hoping by next year we'll have both our sophomores and juniors out there on a regular basis. So we keep them in the field. We mentor them through the field. We have a lot of partnerships with our school divisions. I feel we have our superintendents, our local and regional superintendents come with our WEVPEC association to campus, and we sponsor a breakfast. So we're in tune. We want to be accessible to our school divisions all the time. and help them with their problems, especially in the teacher education shortage area. I would like to talk a little bit about removing some of the barriers that exist to get a teaching license, but if we need to move on to talk about some other things, I'll wait.
Certainly. Dr. Johnson, what's happening at the Department of Education to encourage more students to enter the teaching field?
Sure. I think from our office, we try to look at the challenges from a pipeline perspective. And I think the General Assembly has provided some additional funding that I'll share some of those strategies that do cover from the beginning in terms of high school interest all the way through the mentoring and induction program and retention strategies as well. So again, from our office perspective, again, the Department of Education's instructional staff may be providing some additional innovative opportunities, but within our office, I'm going to highlight a few of the things that we're doing. The Mentor Teacher Clinical Faculty Program for beginning and experiential teachers, bonuses awarded to National Board certified teachers, the Virginia Teaching Loan Scholarships that are offered to our EPP, IHE candidates, funding to support institutions of higher ed with approved special ed programs, to support specifically the provisional licensed teachers to obtain full licenses, funding to support the mentor programs for career switchers and alternative routes within our state, as well as mentorship programs for those candidates. Middle school teacher corps for mathematics, funding to support the governor's STEM academies, which encourage some of our STEM outstanding teachers to work in some of the high need, high staffing, difficult to staff areas. Most recently, as Keena has mentioned, we have completed a comprehensive review of the licensure regs and school personnel regs. They are still in the final stages of approval, but within the new proposed regs, there are some opportunities. We've added add-ons in special ed to again address some of the high need shortage areas, as well as an engineering endorsement. Additionally, there's an online teacher license in the licensure regs as well. Additionally, we have worked with ETS and identifying and now have accepted a Braille proficiency test, a ESL, or English as Speakers of Other Language test, an Algebra 1 test, all of which provide an alternate route for individuals to add those endorsements on through testing. So many of our graduates are coming out with multiple endorsements, as well as working with you all in terms of a fast track of helping some of your current teachers add on with just a testing option there. And so those have come into effect in 2017. Additionally, we've added an opportunity for an equivalent assessment for entering into the education programs, as well as looking at the 2016 new SAT assessment and equivalence. We have several models of teacher residency programs that are heavily funded federally as well as state, models at ODU and VCU, where actual individuals are employed with many of you in those decals and locales, and they're continuing on in their master's degree, completing the credentials while employed with you, the residency model. Issued a request for proposals for alternate teacher compensation competitive planning grants, as well as added a new position with the department in terms of a coordinator for the professional development across the state. And so now there will be a point of central contact for all divisions and the work at the department. Additionally, this year I participated on one of the initiatives from our Secretary of Education, who identified and developed a teacher diversity task force this year that was made up of various representatives and stakeholders from colleges, school divisions, as well as community advocate groups. So you'll hear more about that. Additionally, the state, in partnership with William and Mary, also were awarded a wonderful grant for a new Troops to Teachers Center that will be housed at William and Mary College. But again, that will focus on the entire state, but the resources are funneled through William and Mary. And I guess I'll highlight Teach for Tomorrow. I think Keena mentioned that as well. That is a statewide effort, but we do see some varied models of that. And some regions have, I guess, more engagement in those opportunities, but for sure we are supporting that at the DOE. I think they were involved in the conferences around the state as well. And then many of you have your Grow Your Own programs that we support. For example, I think in Longwood, there is the Call Me Mister program, which is encouraging and supporting males, African-American males, in the profession there, and they work with the school divisions to identify high school students that they recommend and support for their program. And I think that probably highlights some of the things we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Now, what's better than seeing a student graduate from your local high school for board members and superintendents is probably seeing them return 4 years later to teach and to start their teaching career in their home school system. One of the things that both Dr. Colley and Dr. Johnson spoke about is homegrown programs and partnerships to better define the pathway to teaching. Dr. Colley, we'll start with you. What type of partnerships can be developed with local school systems, and what are you doing at Radford University to cultivate those partnerships?
Well, first of all, we are the recipient of, in just our special ed program alone, I had our Director of Sponsored Programs and Grant Research send us our special ed grants that we have this year. So we have $3,780,000 in grants, many of them through the Virginia Department of Education and other places. So we actively go after grants, and the majority of those grants helped fund teachers in the classrooms. So teachers that are coming back provisionally, or some assistance, tuition assistance, and also a lot of those are outreach to our local school divisions. As you know, our TTAC system, which we have a very successful one at Radford University, reaches out to 34 school divisions in Southwest Virginia. And so we provide that ongoing professional development and support for teachers and administrators. And we've had that now we're in our 21st year of having a TTAC center at Radford. So our superintendents, and I told them this, I think last week or the week before when we were at our breakfast, that they bring me information. So they said, well, Dr. John Eisenberg is out there as our state superintendent or state special ed director, and he had some leftover money at the end of the year. And I was like, oh, that made me pay attention. I could use some leftover money. So what we did is I was actually down in Florida at a conference for teacher education, and I called him and Patty Pitts up and said, I would like to have some of that leftover money, and we can go ahead and train some special educators for you. Mostly paraprofessionals and long-term subs that were in schools, because those are the people who are living in the communities and they're going to stay there. And that's who we are really going after as far as a non-traditional population to recruit into teacher ed. Those are folks that are already working in your schools, that live in your communities. So we were able to get about $180,000, and we were able to fund 100 seats in our Intro to Special Ed, if you're going to call it that, Current Trends and Issues class. That is the class they need to get a beginning provisional license. And so those folks needed a lot of development. It was not the easiest to make a asynchronous class and to get those folks. Some of them said, I haven't been on a computer for 10, 15 years, or taken a class for 10 or 15 years. And like, we'll mentor you through this. So I think there's a lot of folks out there that we can develop into teachers, that we can provide them with opportunities. So we were able to get a lot of those help our school divisions with the support of the DOE, which we greatly appreciate, and that fund to grow special educators. And that's what we called the grant, even though it wasn't a grant, because I'm bold enough to call up and ask for money when there's no grant. So that's another strategy that we used. We would really like to develop our own alternative certification programs. I know Teach for Tomorrow is a national program. I'm not completely convinced that that's the way for us to go. If you let higher ed in Virginia own our own alternative certification programs, we can build those and we can train the teachers probably better than Teach for Tomorrow. And we know it has to be in a compressed schedule, and we know we have to be extremely creative in how we offer that, but we're ready to do that. I think the other piece that I would like to mention, and I don't know if this is the time to do it, but what are the barriers that need to go away? Oh, I moved to the next question, sorry. Okay. I'll wait. I get a little over-anxious about these.
Yeah, just FYI, I'm writing everything. I'm rather new to this position that I'm in, so I'm writing down everything they say, like grants and AT&T stores, and so, you know, AT&T is good for something besides taking my money, so that's nice to know. Dr. Johnson?
Well, I think we serve as a facilitator and bringing individuals and various stakeholders together to develop the partnerships, and I think we've mentioned and highlighted some of those. And then I guess I would also just capture some of the things I am aware from other colleges as well. Several colleges, she mentioned the career switcher, so currently we have 4 career switcher programs that are approved in the state, and they are in various parts and region of the state, as well as one of those is actually the community college route. So that often, I think it's Educate Virginia, is not something that's very publicized. And again, we do have 4 total career switcher programs that are approved in the state, meaning typically you come to the programs with success in the assessments and a degree in the area of content that you're seeking the endorsement in. And then the institution provides you the accelerated opportunity to complete the professional studies requirements to quickly move you to eligibility for your employment and a full-time license, a regular license. So we've got several of those in the state. But again, I think we've mentioned some other things I think other colleges are doing. They're working with the community colleges and being very specific with their articulation agreements so that individuals can complete much of those basic gen ed requirements and have those transfer totally in to a 4-year program to reduce the cost to them and the time in the 4-year program that will quickly lead them to a successful transition into the education prep program, many of them taking the entry assessments as well during that process. And then I talked also, I guess from the state's perspective, in terms of partnerships, I think you'll hear more about Patty Pitts and Dr. Kendra Crump actually doing more work to make the school divisions and superintendents aware of alternate routes that are already available that may not be used for various reasons, but I think you'll hear more about what's already approved and written in the regs, and the flexibility that the school divisions have in hiring and using some alternate routes for themselves. So you'll hear, I think, more about that in the coming months as well.
Yeah. And I agree. I think a sweet spot is having K-12, community colleges, and institutes of higher education all partnering to define a pathway that's almost seamless, that almost 360s back into the home school division. So excellent. Now, Dr. Colley, what are the barriers to developing a teaching population? What are some of the policy barriers that exist?
So this is, I'm not always popular with this one, so I think one of the things is that I would like to see all the testing that teachers have to take go away. I believe in accountability, and I was a public school teacher at one of the best times in our country, and I guess I took the national teacher exam, and we had high pass rates on that exam. I worked with dynamic teachers. I worked in Virginia public schools. I taught in New York, and I taught in Maryland and in Virginia. And when I taught in Virginia, we had the standards of learning, but children were not tested on them. We had dynamic classrooms. We had writer's workshop. We had problem-based learning. We had project-based learning, all those things that are being talked about again, thankfully. But as teachers, we were doing an excellent job in our classrooms, and we didn't have to take a lot of tests and pay Pearson and ETS tons of money to do this. The reason I'm passionate about this is because the students we have at Radford, Virginia, we're seeing a lot of issues around those tests, which is one of our greatest barriers. We have students that come to us from very diverse backgrounds. We have 40% of first-generation students. We have 40% of diverse students and students of color on our campus. And we feel like the access and opportunity that sometimes they have come to us with is not the same. But we can develop them when they are there. And a lot of time these tests are very discriminatory against them. We know the tests are very white normed. We know they're white upper middle class norm tests. We also know that there's a lot of success, there's a lot of money in failure. So these companies are making a tremendous amount of money based on our students not passing the tests. And it's amazing how many students we can't accept into our programs because they're missing 1 or 2 points on a test. So one of the case studies I wanted to just share with you is we have this great gal who's just a dynamic young English ed student who wants to teach English in high schools. She has a learning disability in math. We could not enter her into our teacher ed program because she continued after 8 times not getting the 1 point on the math praxis test to come into our program. And so those are some of the pieces we have to look at and advocate for. Why is that a barrier? I mean, we have to take some of those barriers down. We have a young man who's just a dynamic young man. He is deaf, and he's coming into our DHH program, Deaf Hard of Hearing program. We're the only one in the state that has that program. And because of growing up deaf, his writing skills look very different than people who are not deaf. So he can't pass the VCLA. So am I going to keep him out of our program? So we have to look at if I were his parents, I'd say this is a lawsuit. This is discrimination against a person with a disability. And I think one of the things is that I feel very passionate about this because I'm seeing it again and again. We have a young woman, we have nobody in our Spanish education program, not one candidate. And we have a young gal, and she took the Praxis 2 3 times. She's a native Spanish speaker, and she couldn't pass the Praxis 2 in Spanish. So I really think we need to look at the tests being a huge barrier because I don't think there's a correlation of whether these young people are going to be good teachers or not. And I do feel like we have to look at taking some of these barriers away. And it's not that way everywhere. I was at the CAPE conference, which is our accreditation organization up in DC, the national accreditation. And we have to jump through so many hoops for accreditation in teacher ed. It is extremely intensive. It is extremely time intensive, and it does create wonderful continuous improvement in our programs. But it is very rigorous. So we do have rigor in our teacher ed programs. I don't know how we could survive in CAPE with CAPE accreditation if we weren't always looking at making current changes in our programs, because we're under a lot of scrutiny there. So we do have a lot of accountability, and we do have really high-level programs. I know there are some of our partners in higher ed, UVA, William & Mary, who don't face the same issues with the tests, with the teacher ed licensure tests that we do, because of the kind of students that they have. We are not always pulling from the top 10 or 20% of students at Radford University, but we provide an excellent education and opportunity for students at Radford University, and we have students of all kinds. So those are some of the pieces that I see as the greatest barrier from where I sit as a dean at Radford University, and I do think it does look very different across universities. So,
Okay. Dr. Johnson?
And I'll use the slide just to share a few things.
Okay.
And Keena, I'll tell you if the legislation changes in regards to assessment, we'll support you. But just to highlight a few things I think reflect, and again, it's pretty small, but I think this, oh, sorry. I think these are some things that we've been aware of for many years, and so some I would call, this is the elephant in the room. According to the 2016 research of Linda Darling-Hammond and others in the Coming Crisis in Teaching, they categorize many of the barriers into these 4 major categories: compensation, which can be contributed to the oftentimes the cost and length of a teacher preparation program, and then actual compensation, And then the loans, now the great debt ratio for many of our graduates, and then the actual compensation they receive once they are employed in the varying school divisions across the Commonwealth with varieties of salaries and various benefits. And second, preparation could relate to opportunities for field experiences. I hear often that it's almost a challenge for some institutions to have experiences to get their students, their candidates with high quality, effective teachers, because the teachers now are so overwhelmed with their own accountability. So that has become a challenge even within the state of having effective opportunities for placements. Second, and the partnership development. Some universities have great partnerships, and then there are others that do not. And so that whole bridging the gap between what they're receiving in preparation and what's needed in the locality is missing for some institutions. Monitoring and induction. So this could be part of the EPP's experience, but most we see this as relates to the actual employment, the mentoring and induction programs once they are hired, and the inconsistencies there, the lack of funding or small amounts of funding that are spent on the mentoring of our first-year teachers. And then teaching conditions, the culture, the environment which we are hiring and having the teachers work in. And so again, nationally, I think this is very reflective of what we see in our state and could capture many of the things I think that we share. We talked about the enrollment and the reasons for that. I think we also must address the profession's respect, and currently individuals are not seeking our profession for some of those reasons, obviously. And you mentioned the new students, and there are even plans to stay. Maybe they take a position, but their plans are such that typically, if the climate is not good or is not supportive for them, they move on. And for us and many of our parents, that was your only profession, and you stayed in that one profession. But for many of them, they're moving on in 2 to 3 years to something else just because it didn't feel good to them, you know. Or they felt like, well, I have to pay my loans, and so I have to make choices based on my economics. And so oftentimes we haven't addressed those kinds of things. Let me think, did I think of anything else? Especially with many of our minority candidates, they have many more options than we've had in the past for many of our students. And we also see that there could be some differential hard-to-staff regions, and so there could be different reasons why we have some issues with retention in certain regions based on where they are and the needs of the students there. But I think those are a couple.
Okay. And one thing I'd like to add, and it speaks to your all's role in retaining teachers, and I'm sure you're aware of it because I've seen some great induction programs throughout the Commonwealth. The onboarding process for public school teachers is so critical. One thing that I learned from research about 10 years ago, I think a researcher asked the question, who has the greatest impact on your philosophy? And it's always that mentor teacher. It's that person that you assign the student teacher with, and it's that person that you assign their very first year to mentor them that's going to have the greatest impact on their continuing philosophy for the rest of their careers. So that's so important that we recognize, you know, that induction process between higher education and public school, the hiring of a teacher in public schools. Our last question deals with what is the one thing that you would do to address the challenge of attracting and retaining high-quality teachers in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And Dr. Johnson, you want to start?
One thing, that was hard.
One thing.
So with this audience, I would say, obviously, I've mentioned that Assistant Superintendent Patty Pitts and Dr. Crump will be working with the school divisions and superintendents on really looking at the flexibility that you do have in working with the approved programs and using alternative routes. Some of that probably from my office would probably be the one thing that would give us the biggest bang for our time. So that's probably the one thing for this audience I would recommend.
She's so good, she stuck to one. I don't know if I can just do one. I'm trying to pick by one. There's so many. Top two. I think one of the issues is just to keep our teachers there is to get folks excited about teaching. We remain true partners with our school divisions in the fact that I was a supervisor in our schools for many, many years, up until just several years ago. And I felt like I could walk into those school buildings. I had that comfort level of really knowing our partners well. I could sit down on the floor and start teaching right alongside my student teachers. And I think that's a really important piece, that we have that comfort level, and we also have the knowledge at our level in higher ed that we could do that job. The other thing is we want to continue to provide great professional development and for the teachers that are out there. We have many of teachers that are out there who are our adjuncts, that serve as our adjuncts and teach at Radford University, which is excellent because they are in the classrooms every day and they have the expertise that they can come and teach our young candidates, and many times they present with us at conferences. We're doing a lot of initiatives alongside teachers where they partner with us. We have a co-placement model where we co-place special ed and elementary ed together, and our young teacher candidates are together. From day one, they learn that the teaching is about being with someone else, co-planning, co-assessing, co-teaching, and that you have to work together. It's a collaborative field. You're never going to be a teacher alone in a classroom. And so we're in year 14 of that model that I helped build, and it's just got great success because we're following up with those students who went through that model through some of the research we're doing, and they are still in the field because we trained them in the field the way they should have been trained in the field. The other piece is we're offering a lot of professional development for teachers, like the Virginia NAME Conference, Multicultural Education Conference is in November. We have the new Teachers Academy in December, and these are $25 for teachers to attend. So one of the things is we just have to cover the cost of food so they can have a breakfast and a lunch. And I don't always have all that in my budget. But so things like that are very important, and we fill the seats and they come and they get continued professional development. And we also use them in our classes to also be professional development for our students and reaching back out to them. So I think that partnership across DOE, higher ed, and our school divisions is so very important. Nobody's putting up the barriers. We want to take those barriers down together. And even though there are some things that we may not agree upon, we're trying to work together to take some of those barriers down. And I think that's the most important piece. And we're working very, very hard to grow teachers in Virginia.
And I would say I think the challenge has forced us to prioritize our objectives and our strategies together. And so I think that has been probably one of the main benefits, I think, of us working together. I do have one other comment. You mentioned your accreditation. I think I would be remiss if I did not use this opportunity. Many of our institutions are in the same situation that she described, in that their accreditor really requires them to demonstrate that they have an outcome related to their opportunity in employment. And so that relationship and partnership with your school division is primary and key in that. And so they're going to be seeking innovative opportunities and strategies and ways that they can partner with you all to actually demonstrate the impact that their graduates have once they're employed with you. And so you'll hear probably more about that, but I think this would be a wonderful opportunity for us to begin that discussion of how we can develop those partnerships of sharing that information and working together to help the universities actually address some of their own accreditation requests and to document the impact of their students.
And one additional area, and I know Bill Kidd's over there, and I know he's going to ask this question, but I'll go ahead and throw it out there. But career and technical education, are we seeing lots of shortages across the board?
And I think most recently that there has actually been new legislation that have made some fast-track opportunities in the state to add CTE without many of the requirements, pretty much none of them. But so there's been some fast-track legislation that will be leading to more CTE opportunities. Okay. So So, correct.
Okay, at this time, we'd like to take any questions from the audience.
Steve Colazar from Albemarle County. Are there any dual enrollment courses available for intro to education that we could be teaching in our high schools to get our high school students excited about becoming educators and a leg up?
Yes, I guess we'll both respond. Teachers for Tomorrow really coordinates that effort at the state level and allows the high school to work with the either community college or either the IHE in their division to typically offer like an intro to education, which can be considered like a foundation of ed. And I think they're actually trying to expand that to multiple classes. Correct, yes. And so for sure for Teachers Through Tomorrow, but then there are other dual enrollment opportunities if you just work with the various colleges to determine the criteria for those programs. So that's something that would be handled between the school division or high school and the actual college.
Nate Clancy, Culpeper County School Board. Thank you again for the panel. You talked about a 4-year and even a 3-year degree to kind of fast track it. We know that'd probably be a vigorous schedule with a 3-year degree. Are you guys in favor of, and have you heard of the internships to where you can do a 3-year with a 1-year? Because we have, and I'm sure all the divisions suffer this, teacher gets into a new position, decides it's not for them. I think that 1 year of internship could have kind of done away with all that, all that hassle that we bring them in and they decide it's not for them and then they move on.
So I talked a little bit earlier about trying to get students out earlier. It's definitely during their sophomore and junior years, so they have that experience. All of our programs have 1 full year in the schools as far as internship. So we have both fall and spring, they are out there. We do have a 5-year program in special education, and the reason that we have that program is they come out with 2 licensures in special education and a 1-year master's, which is a great opportunity for them to come out with a master's degree and 2 licensure areas in special ed. And they're out in, because they're K through 12 in special education, they're out in 4 different placements. So we feel like they are close to being master teachers by the time they leave that 5-year program. It's extremely rigorous. We really hold their feet to the fire. We figured if they survive that 5 years and 4 different placements, they are really ready. And so, and they are, because we coach them and mentor them extremely closely. So,
You'll find that the traditional programs have that model. I think that Keena has mentioned some of the fast track could be the alternative routes that have that model that's really trying to get them quickly into the class, where they're supposed to be demonstrating the content knowledge upon entry. So those are typically our alternate routes. But again, that's the balance between meeting the needs for the high demand, right, with the preparation. So that's kind of our conundrum of meeting the demand and then providing them with the preparation they need.
So for our provisionally licensed folks that are going through our programs, we have some grants that provide them with some tuition assistance, and we kind of have an alternate practicum for them. So they are actually taping their lessons, putting them into a secure system called Athena that we use, which is video performance feedback. And so our university professors then give them feedback on their teaching in their classrooms instead of us physically going out there. So they are acting as teachers, but they're still getting that support and coaching and mentoring via us watching the tapes. And what you can do is you can stop the tape, put in a comment, watch a little bit more, put in a comment, and then they put their reflective comments back. So it's a different form of coaching that we've figured out, and it's working pretty well.
Phyllis Henry Hampton. Teachers learn to be good pirates and steal ideas. There's some other states who have been doing things for a long time. I hope we do more with testing people out of requirements. Texas has been klepping people out of requirements for over 20 years. We need to do more of that. I also think that North Carolina for over 50 years offered scholarships to the brightest kids in high school to go to college tuition free if they promised to serve 4 years as a teacher. People say, oh, but they'll leave after that. If they're, I want that brightest kid for 4 years. I don't care if they leave afterwards. With debt, student debt being what it is, why in the world aren't we doing that?
I think Chev actually offers some scholarships that are similar to that, to be honest with you. Chev, the State Council of Higher, offers some. I'm with you. So we need to lobby for more funding. And I know our department offers the Virginia Teaching Loan Scholarship for individuals that are in our teacher prep programs. But we need to lobby for more, especially with the costs now for tuition.
Hi, Marty Graham from Montgomery County. Dr. Colley, with your experience and partnership with the local school divisions, how have you seen the SOLs affect the teacher shortage?
I think that I can speak really for Southwest Virginia, since that's where most of our partnerships are with the school divisions. It's not that we don't train kids that go back to Tidewater and Richmond and Northern Virginia and everywhere else in the state, because we have students from everywhere at Radford. I think it's just a lot of communication, being very visible, very accessible. Like we said, having a lot of events on campus that bring people in, us being out in the schools. The model at Radford is not the model everywhere, but we feel like our coaching and mentoring is extremely strong. So when I was a supervisor in the schools as a full-time faculty member, you know, I was out there 7:30 in the morning pulling up to the school buildings, and it's all faculty who are our supervisors out in the school divisions. And I think that can make a difference too. We also know our school divisions very, very well, and know our partners. See John Wheeler here from Floyd. When I was a supervisor out in his middle school, and we had a tragedy where we had our Blacksburg High School, our roof caved in and fell down, and so we no longer had a high school, and so they had a really unique situation where we had to have our middle school students and our high school students share the same building, and some go in the morning and some go at night. And I was supervising at that time, and the flexibility of working with both of those principals was really helpful to say, well, we'll still keep our student teachers, and some will go during the day and some will go at night. And then also, then he ended up needing a couple special ed teachers that year, and we had two dynamic young women that were student teaching at the time, and so he was able to hire them for the remainder of the year when I think someone went out on maternity leave, and another one left because of her husband's job. So it's that flexibility that we have to look at and say, we can help you out, we're partners with you, and put those teachers in there. And having that relationship makes a big difference.
My name's Alex Sakwija. I'm a school board member in Russell County in the far southwest. I've got a simple question that probably most of the people in the room already know the answer to, but I'm curious. Dr. Colley mentioned the tests that teachers have to take to become licensed, and that is a barrier in so many ways, keeping good people from having these jobs. I'm curious as to what the percent would be of the people that pass these praxis tests the first time around. Does anybody happen to know that?
Well, yes, I think to be honest with you, the state doesn't collect that information. We are concerned with those that pass and receive 100% pass rate to receive their license. But the individual universities do monitor that, and they are held accountable for pass rates and incorporating that in looking at their programs and outcomes. So individual universities would have unique pass rates.
The pass rates vary from university to university, and we have many kids that are taking the tests over and over and over again at $180 at each time. So they're spending exorbitant amounts of money on the tests. We started 3 years ago. I created a Praxis 1 preparation. And the main thing is we've worked with our math department, and our math department has analyzed the test. They went in, we said, would you take the Praxis Core Math and analyze it for us? So we had several math professors take it. And it was really interesting what they found is like they asked such random things that really don't go together on this test. It's not the kind of mathematics that we would even sometimes teach or that you would need in teacher education. And these are not just for our math teachers, this is the Praxis Core Math. So it's really interesting. So we took that analysis and then we designed a Praxis Core Math preparation course. And then what I did is I got some funding and we are paying, if you take the course for the 8 weeks, we'll pay for your test to take it for our students. And we're really trying to tell parents when they come in, please have your students take this Praxis Core Math test over the summer before they get here if they're coming into teacher ed, because that's new in their brain. So think about it, if I passed out the Praxis Core Math test today to all of you with no preparation, and you've been away from that math for a while, not your budgets, but away from the kind of math that's on this test, probably in this room we would all struggle because we haven't been using that. So sometimes it's the fact that our students, it's not that our students aren't smart and capable, it's the fact that they haven't been using that mathematics for a while, probably since junior or senior year of high school. And then they come in and they try to take the test years later when they're juniors in college, and they just can't recall the information because they haven't been using it on a daily basis. So we have to look at some of those pieces too. So we're trying to look at some ways that we can help with that.
Mr. Zakowicz, I can tell you 2 things they don't assess, and that's grit and the ability to go in and build a relationship with the child. And that's what we're losing in the process with some of these teachers.
Good morning. My name is Bill Lobb. I'm a member of State and City School Board. My son graduated from Radford, had a problem with the Praxis test. So I'm familiar with that. I also was a school administrator, so I evaluated and interviewed a lot of teachers. And I had a PE teacher who was a fantastic PE teacher, and she couldn't pass the damn math test in Praxis. Almost lost her. Good coach, wonderful PE teacher. Liked kids, kids liked her, but she almost failed, she almost got out of education because of the Praxis test. I look at a GPA on an application. I don't look at 4.0. Quite frankly, I prefer somebody without a 4.0 because they can relate to kids. The 4.0 person, a lot of times, they're up here, kids are down here, and it doesn't come across. But the Praxis test, SOLs have taken 20 years for our state to look at how we can change these tests to relate to our kids and common sense-wise. Same thing with the Praxis test. We have lost, when my son was at Radford, he failed the Praxis test. He's a PE teacher, and in English, he couldn't student teach. So I, as a principal, went down and said, why not? When I get an application, I look at student teacher grade. If you can't student teach, how am I going to know? Well, send him to North Carolina to teach. In 3 years, he can come back up here, and no one cares about his Praxis scores. Isn't that send a nice message to students from Virginia? It's amazing. Cooperative teachers. I've had cooperative teachers who do a great job, but some, we don't want a mini-me. We want someone who's a student, who's a cooperative teacher, who will bring a student teacher in and let them experiment. They're never going to find out what they can do as a teacher if you don't let them try. As a principal, I tell a teacher come in to me and said, is it okay if I try this? You're never going to find out if it works or not if you don't try it. So if it doesn't work, cross it off your list. So a lot of things this state needs to do to help get teachers. We are hurting for teachers, but a lot of it is our own doing. And until we stop doing that, and then we look at this thing we're coming out of the state about discipline, talk to your teachers about why they leave. It's a lack of discipline in the schools. So we're going to have another program over here to help these kids, and I'm all for that. But we also have to look at carefully that we don't make it tougher on the teachers. We have to keep discipline in our buildings to keep the teachers satisfied. I can teach a class without being worried about talking to Johnny all day for an hour, and these 25 kids don't learn a darn thing. So it all goes hand in hand. We as a state have got to be careful what we do because we're hurting ourselves without realizing it because we get people making these rules who don't understand a thing about education. Thank you.